So I get a dishwashing job for a spell at Dropkin House. Dropkin House bills itself as a historical tavern, but it was really an old stone milk barn they used as a battlefield hospital. 120 years ago, hundreds of soldiers got their legs sawed off in the same room where, today, tourists crowd in to eat prime ribs served by waitresses in period costumes. But this is 1982, and tourists aren't coming. I don't have a lot of dishes to wash. When the spring comes, the place closes down. But a couple weeks before it closes, I'm at my station when Cashtown Annie comes in with a tray of dirty dishes from the only two customers who came in that night. She's a costume waitress from the neck down, and she wears a bright red hunting cap with ear flaps at all times. You ask anybody, they shrug and say, that's just Cashtown Annie. But this night, she comes in and she starts talking.
I'm freezing. Ooh, ain't you freezing?
No, it's actually pretty warm down here.
Hey, your name's Frederico, ain't it?
No, my name's Danny.
Yeah, I know you. You live over in them ice houses, don't you?
No, next door to him.
Ooh, you got to be careful over there by them ice houses, Frederico. There's some real unsavory sorts living over there in them ice houses.
Really? Like who?
Well, for starters, there's Mr. Patio. You want to look out for him?
Why do they call him Mr. Patio?
I don't know. I guess because he got in a fight one time and some guy hit him in the face with a patio brick, and that's why his face looks all like that.
Anything else I should know?
Ooh. Well, let's see. Oh, don't go up in those woods by McPherson Ridge. That's where them witches hang out. Them are some crazy witches, boy. One of them is a pretty good friend of mine. But the others, well, I wouldn't go poking around in them woods. Oh, but that one witch, the one that's a pretty good friend of mine. Let's see, Augusta? Greta? No, the one which is the one who warned me about the Dead Woman Creek.
Henry?
Don't go swimming in Dead Woman Creek. She told me, and now I told you, Frederico, every so often, the dead woman washes up in the creek, and then they take her back and bury her, and she just keeps washing up in the creek again next big rain. But don't you go trying to retrieve that body if you see it out there, because she'll pull you under, boy. She'll pull you under, and she'll be laughing while she does it, too. Augusta told me that. No, or maybe it was Greta.
Annie.
That's good to know.
And what else? Oh, let's see. Oh, yeah. There's Vlad the Impala. But everybody knows to keep your distance from Vlad the Impala.
Why do they call him Vlad the Impala?
I guess I don't know. Oh, maybe because he drives an Impala. But you watch yourself over there, Frederico. Oh, and if anybody asks, you ain't seen Cashtown Annie.
Annie.
Now, what do you want, Mr. Floor Manager? Mr. Man? I'm just talking with Frederico, that's all. You don't want me talking to Frederico? What's that? You want me to take my hat off? How about you turn on some heat down here? There ain't no heat down here. It's freezing down here. You turn the heat up, I'll turn the work up. How about that? Whew, it's a wonder you ever get any customers down here. What's it freezing for? The cadavers? You got some sawed off Confederate legs in the freezer? That's what you serving them tourists. Well, it don't matter a pinch to me because I'm done with y'all. I quit. I'm done. Goodbye.
And that's it for Cashtown Annie. And a couple of weeks later, Mr. Floor Manager comes in and tells me they're closing the restaurant for good. And I'm done. But this great thing happens. He feels bad. And he gives me my last check. And he also gives me $20 cash because he feels bad. And I take that $20 bill and I walk straight over to the Johnny Rebel Billy Yank Bar and Grill. And I fall straight off that wagon. I drink 5 or 6 pitchers, all by myself. Sitting at a bar stool watching the Hershey Bears on the grainy TV. And then I go home, pull myself into my sleeping bag, and wait for the spins to start. And the spins start like they always do each time I fall off the wagon. But this time it's different because there's the body of an old lady up there on my ceiling spinning around like she's floating in a creek.
So this guy, Danny, he lays low for a couple of weeks, watching out for the landlord's boys sent to collect his back rent. So Danny watches them through the curtain of his kitchen window. When they bang on the door, Danny scoots out the window up the alley and then circles back to the Johnny Reb. That works for some time because nobody comes looking for nobody at the Johnny Reb. That was just the rules back then. But during the days, staring out the window is when Danny started noticing Mr. Patio, or more importantly, Mr. Patio's face. I mean, he really does look like somebody hit him with a patio brick. So Danny stands in his doorway in the row of ice houses watching the 7-Eleven parking lot. And chaos all around him. A mother with 6 naked kids, a fight in the parking lot. Mr. Patio stands there most of the time, smoking and watching. Sometimes a carload of people comes in crowding into the doorways and then they go out. And sometimes Mr. Patio climbs under a Dodge Dart with a wrench covered in vines and up on cinder blocks in the alley. Dividing Danny's house from the ice houses, and clangs on the rusted engine visible to the outside world. And for a while, it gets really, really hot. The corn stalks are burning up all around the east side of town, turning brown and black and crumbling on their stalks. And the corn hangs limp and burnt out of its brown husk like dead things with no teeth. The air smells like popcorn. Now, one night, Danny's in the Johnny Reb lounge, sitting on his stool and drinking his 4th or 5th pitcher for $1 by himself. And it starts raining really, really hard. And Danny doesn't know how hard until he comes outside. So there's water gushing straight down Chambersburg Street. And water is all sparkly from the street lights and the traffic lights. And Danny wades knee deep across the street where the sidewalk's higher, and he follows it down to the bridge over the creek. There are 3 people leaning over the rail, staring down at the raging waters. And one is wearing a red hunting cap and the same waitress costume she walked out of the Dropkin house in weeks before.
Hey, it's Federico. Federico, come check it out. The phosphorus. You gotta see the phosphorus.
That's Danny. My name's Danny.
Yeah, check it out, Federico. Check it out. Look into the water, the phosphorus.
I think it's called phosphorescence, and it's only in the ocean water, and I don't see anything.
No, it's phosphorus. It's all them glowing lights. You gotta look close.
I see the phosphorus.
I definitely see the phosphorus.
Oh, yeah. Now I see it. There it is.
Yeah, I need something. You must never touch the phosphorus. You can look at it. You can admire it. You can even reach for it, but don't never touch it.
Hey,
We're watching for the dead woman. This here's Marsh Creek, but Dead Woman Creek branches right into Marsh Creek, and sometimes she floats down here. Sometimes she just keeps on going. They fished her out once all the way down in Chesapeake Bay. Greta told me. Oh, or was it Augusta?
hey, I think they called it the, oh my goodness. So Danny leaves there, standing there on the bridge, staring into the black rush of water, rising up and reaching for the bridge, but never quite making it. He passes a blue car with two little guys with mustaches sitting in it, staring at the people on the bridge back home. When he lies on the mattress, Danny waits for the dead woman to start her spins. But it's Cash Town Annie, not the dead woman, who starts spinning around the ceiling. Those soft brown eyes, that funny red hat. And a few days later, Danny's walking up Chambersburg Street, keeping an eye out for the landlord's boys when he heard somebody calling his name.
Hey, Federico, hold up a minute. You got a smoke?
Sure.
You got a light?
Yeah.
Say, you seen Cashtown Annie around?
No.
How about Vlad? You seen Vlad the Impala around?
Why do people call him Vlad the Impala?
Who, him? Dunno. Maybe because he drives an Impala. Yeah, man. Old Vlad ain't been right since his dad bought it. You hear about this old man? They found him lying half out the front door. He went right through the screen, man. Ain't no dignity in that. Well, thanks for the smoke there, Federico. You take a read.
One morning, running out of money with the heat bearing down on the little town, this Danny guy decides to find a new job. So he goes to 7-Eleven to buy the local newspaper for the classifieds, but then he sees the beer display. Cans of Schaefer and Schlitz and Rheingold dripping with all of those little drippity drops and the beers get in the beer case. And he buys himself a 6-pack of Tall Boys. And when he walks out in the parking lot, a car pulls off Chambersburg Street. And Danny knows the car. It's a rust gray Impala without a front fender. And the windshield wipers are going, even though it isn't raining yet. And there's one headlight, it's permanent on. And that Impala, it makes a squeaking noise and it belches out a blast of yellow smoke from its underpart and it rolls to a stop.
Hey, Federico, what's up?
Hey, it's Danny, actually.
Well, whatever. You want to ride someplace? You need a lift?
No, I'm good, thanks. I live right over there across the street.
Well, listen now. You think you can help me out with something?
I don't know. I mean, I gotta go to work.
Work? With a 6-pack of beer at 10 in the morning?
Oh, what? This is for later.
Come on, man. Let's go for a spin.
And this Danny guy remembers that I told him once to stay away from Vlad the Impala. But Danny also may be increasingly under the impression at this point that I am not the best primary source of information. I don't know why. So Danny, he pulls the creaking door open and he climbs in the passenger side. And the car smells like a damn ashtray. And Vlad the Impala, he's wearing a trench coat and sneakers. and he's got long, stringy hair that all stuck to his beard. And he pulls out a cigarette and he hands Danny one. And Danny pulls a beer out the ring and he hands Vlad one. And then suddenly the sky turns black and it starts to rain. And Vlad, he pulls the old Impala out onto Washington Street, and the windows go all washed out, and the windshield wipers aren't working, and the traffic light at Lincoln Street, it goes all green, yellow, red, all at once. And the headlights of the other cars just streak away to one side or the other. And Vlad, he fumbles to light a cigarette, cracks the tall boy between his legs, and he steers them through the intersection without driving into anyone or anybody or anything. And then, like magic, the rain stops and the sun bursts through the clouds. And the windshield wipers suddenly squeak on and they drive out of town.
So where are we going?
Out to Biggersville.
What's going on out by Biggersville?
Well, you know, it's like this. Last month, I sold my old man's meat freezer to this guy he knew down in Aintsville. But my old man's house is up the hill in Biggersville. So this thing is huge, you know, but I got to get it down to Aintsville.
So what are we going to do? Tie it to the roof or something?
But my old man's house is up in the hill in Biggersville. The thing is huge, you know, and it ain't. But I definitely got to get it down to Aintsville. So anyway, no, man, you joking? It's way too big to put up there. I'll scratch the roof, but I got it would scratch the roof. But I got this other idea. It's only about 10 miles or so. I think we can just sort of, you know, row it down there.
Row it? What do you mean row it?
Well, thanks to this here rain, that there creek behind the house is going to be all swelled up in about 15 minutes. So we'll just push it out into the water and, you know, row it, I guess.
But it's a meat freezer. It's not a rowboat.
Oh, it's seaworthy. You see, it's airtight. I'm sure of it. Yeah, my old man left 4 deer carcasses in there, unplugged for a month after he died, and I couldn't smell a thing until I opened it.
So Vlad and Danny, they're getting out towards Biggersville, and they start passing farmyards. And you know how the banks reclaimed all the farms and they just dumped the insides of the houses out into the front yard? Okay, but somebody come back and arrange the dumpings like their living rooms. So there's like a couch here, there might be a lounge chair there, and a coffee table smack in the middle. And then just moss and weeds creeping up the upholstery. Windows and doors are broken black holes. Nobody's home. And then they come up to a bridge and there's a blue car with 2 men leaning on it, staring up the road in the other direction. And Vlad sees them and he takes a sudden right. And then they ride up a dirt road a ways and then they pull up in the driveway of one of them dead farmhouses.
Yeah, so I'm sleeping in the car these days and I can't go in the house at night on account of, you know, things and stuff. But there's one thing I know, you don't never sleep in a dead man's bed. That's what Cashtown Annie told me. You don't never sleep in a dead man's bed. You don't never wear a dead man's shoes. And let's see, what else you tell me?
And she sure filled your head with some interesting material.
Oh, that she did. She filled my head with many things, many wondrous things. Let me see. Where was I? The dead man's bed, dead man's shoes, the dead man's creek. Yes. Don't you never go swimming in a dead woman creek. Dead woman creek. She'll pull you down, buddy. She'll pull you down.
Wow. Anything else?
Well, let's see. Don't never drink a dead man's beer. Yes, she did. Yeah. Yes, she told me that. So, the meat locker's in the garage. Come on now, follow me. Hey, you all want a beer?
So there are cases and cases of Schaefer beer covered in cobwebs stacked in one corner of the garage. In the other, there's a big meat locker. And a back door leads down a small hill, and Danny can hear the water bubbling up, surging downstream. And Vlad walks down the hill, and he comes back up, and he pulls two wooden poles out from behind the house and two inner tubes, half filled with air, and a long rope and a crumpled duffel bag. And Vlad tells Danny, grab a case of Schaefer.
Water's up. No time like the present. Now, all we got to do is get the freezer out there in the water, and we'll just follow the creek down to Hanksville.
So what exactly are we doing here?
Well, I guess you should climb in first, and I'll push off. Then I'll climb in second is all.
So maybe we should just push it out there? I mean, without us in it, and we can, just guide it down the creek to Aintsville.
But how are we going to steer it?
It's a creek. Where's it going to go?
Now, look, man, look. I need you to help me out here. Old Cashtown Annie told me you used to work with her in that restaurant. You know how stuff works. So you got to help me make this work. You're the man for the job is all.
I was a dishwasher. I know how a dishwasher works.
So it's like she always told me. If you make one thing work, you can make anything work.
And what's the name of this creek?
This here's Dead Woman Creek.
And didn't Cashtown Annie tell you not to go into Dead Woman's Creek?
She told me not to go swimming in Dead Woman Creek. We ain't swimming. We're boating.
So Vlad and Danny, they push the meat locker to the edge of the water. And they tie the inner tubes around the front and the back. And Danny wedges the door open with a stick. And he climbs into the freezer. And it smells pretty bad. And it rocks from left to right. And Vlad pushes off and he climbs behind Danny. And they are sucked under a bridge, spinning wildly. And Danny looks up and he sees the two men from the bridge yelling something, but they disappear around a bend. And it's surprisingly loud, water churning through the low-hanging branches, surging over rocks. And there's a little old man sitting at the end of a little dock with a fishing pole in his hand. He waves at him.
Oh, what fur boat you boys got there?
Meat locker.
Oh, where for are you boys headed? Well, best of luck to you.
Suddenly, the meat lockers lurches down a cascade. Brown water starts filling the locker, and the locker keeps spinning, and the poles keep getting stuck. And Vlad, he says,
Hold it down, hold it down.
he says, push harder, pull harder.
I'm pushing. I'm pulling.
Pull it that way.
There's a tree coming. A tree.
But it's too late. Danny's head smacks into a low-hanging branch, all filled with rotten apples, and he bobs underwater, thinking it's the bony fingers of the dead woman ripping at him, pulling him down into the deep surge. but it's just the strap of the duffel bag wrapped around his leg. So he kicks out and he pops up on the surface. And the last thing that Danny sees of Vlad is him poling madly far downstream. And for a second, Vlad stands up still, like a photograph, in the well of the sinking meat locker, his trench coat shining in the splashing water, his hair everywhere, a frantic look in his eyes. And then he turns a corner and disappears. And Danny never sees Vlad the Impala again.
About 8 hours later, Danny gets back to town and he's almost dry. It's just before sunset and he's walking up the back alley to the ice houses. And there's 2 legs sticking out from under the remains of the Dodge Dart. Danny tries to slip by, but I seen him coming. I pop my head out straight where the hood ought to be. Now just 2/3 of a rusted engine. But I'm trying to unbolt something from something else. Federico, come over here for a second. Yeah. So, whatever happened out there with Vlad the Impala? Huh? He's sort of pissed off is all. Said you screwed up his meat locker deal.
I screwed up. I didn't screw anything up. Meat freezers aren't boats, man. They are not designed to be paddled down creeks. What did he tell you?
Well, now that's what I told him. He said he may have lost something, you know. He was wondering if maybe you found it and, well, he wasn't telling him.
Did he tell you the creek was up 10 feet? Did he tell you I almost drowned and he left me there and I had to walk all the way back here?
Well, now don't get all sore at me. I told him it might not work. But now he's all sore as hell at you.
Yeah, well, I didn't do anything.
That's what he said. He said you didn't paddle fast enough. Anyhow, just thought I should tell you in case, you know, somebody comes looking something or something.
What are they going to be looking for? What are you talking about? Trouble?
I climb out from under the car so I can talk straight with this Danny guy. I wipe up my hands on my grease-coated pants and signal for Danny to give me a smoke, which he does, even though it's damp. Somehow he lights a damp match too. I stare up past Danny at the ice houses. Then up behind them, a line of brown clouds is building up to the west of town, tumbling up and over themselves, flashing in the fading daylight. Well, as it turns out, he was delivering the meat locker to some folks, and, you know, it was a pretty important thing, you know, this meat locker, and them folks may not have got the whole story, and they may send some hillboys down here looking for you is all.
Didn't do anything.
That's what I told them. Anyway, you should be on the lookout is all. Say, was Cashtown Annie up by your place?
Cashtown Annie. Why would she be up at my place?
Somebody said they saw her is all. No, could be anybody.
I haven't seen Cashtown Annie since that night on the bridge.
That's what I told him.
That's what you told who?
That's what I'm telling you. There's some people, that's all. Big old hill boys. They're looking for something is all. So you keep an eye out. A couple of big raindrops hit the bricks. I squish up my face at Danny, which is pretty easy to do on account of the patio brick. I climb back under the car and disappear. And Danny, he runs for his apartment. I can see him running through the window from where I'm lying, sitting down in a plastic chair by his kitchen table, falling asleep on his folded arms. And then a couple hours later, this is how I hear it all goes down. Okay. Danny wakes up right there at his kitchen table to the sound of heavy boots coming up the stairs. Crap, Danny thinks. The landlord's boys, the hill boys. Well, he jumps up, ready to go for the window. But there they are, squinting at him. But they're not the landlord's boys. And they are not the Hill boys. They're the mustache guys from the bridge and the blue car.
Mr. Patio, we're looking for Mr. Patio. You, Mr. Patio?
My name's not Mr. Patio.
Oh,
yeah?
yeah?
Where's Mr. Patio then?
I never heard of anybody named Mr. Patio. Why would anybody name their kid Mr. Patio?
We know all about it, Mr. Patio. We've been looking for you. We're looking for a girl named Cashtown Annie. You know where is that Cashtown Annie?
Cashtown, who?
You know, Cashtown Annie.
Why do they call her Cashtown Annie?
I don't know. They call everybody something, I guess. Anyways, you know her?
I guess I might have heard of a girl named something Annie, but I haven't seen her in months. She moved down to Baltimore, I think.
So you ain't Mr. Patio, and you ain't seen Cashtown Annie?
I don't know anybody named Mr. Patio, and I never did. And I told you, I haven't seen Cashtown Annie in months.
Well, dang. You got any weed?
No, I don't smoke weed.
You got anything stronger than weed?
No, man, I don't do nothing like that.
You know where we can find something like that? We drove all the way up from Frederick. Friends sent us. They told us to find Mr. Patio or Cashtown Annie.
Well, sorry, I guess. I haven't seen her in months.
Really? Because one of your friends back there, they told me they saw her yesterday.
I guess we're just gonna have to hang out here until she gets back.
She left months ago. I don't hardly know her.
Hey, you look hungry, pal. What did you say your name was?
Frederico. My name's Frederico.
Well, what do you say I'll go across the street to that 7-Eleven, find us something to eat?
Oh, you're in for a treat. This guy's an ace cook.
I don't think the stove works. The landlord turned the gas off.
Oh, we'll come up with something. Come to think of it, we'll be right back.
Sure thing. The door's always open.
When the screen door slams, Danny gets up and pushes his way down the dark corridor. He knocks 4 times and then opens the 3rd or 4 doors. And Cashtown Annie is sitting on the edge of that bed there, slowly pulling on her cowboys. I told you, Cashtown Annie was up there. And she's been sleeping on and off since she got there. Danny looks through the curtains and the 2 guys down the street. They are standing next to a blue sedan in the 7-Eleven parking lot, talking through the window to 2 other guys.
Have you come to take me away?
I'm gonna help you get out of here, is all. We are going to get out of here.
Danny pulls everything off the bed, her stuff and his stuff, and he stuffs it into the same old backpack he dragged with him into this town 6 months before. Danny gives Cashtown Annie his hand and guides her back up the corridor to the kitchen, then the kitchen window, then the alley. They walk together, side by side, up the back alley behind the ice houses, then up to the railroad tracks into McPherson Woods. And Danny finds out the 2 witches, Augusta and Greta, are Cashtown Annie's mother and aunt. And they live together in a nice little farmhouse. And they aren't witches at all. They are nice, really nice. They feed Danny a big ham dinner, the first and only real meal he's had this whole time. Is in Gettysburg. And the next morning they give Danny a lift down to I-70. He hitches a ride westbound, and he doesn't come back to Gettysburg for a long time. As for the contents of the missing duffel bag, well, nobody knows where that ends up. I fished the duffel bag out of Dead Woman's Creek a day later, but there isn't nothing inside, and it's all shredded up, like somebody tore it apart with their fingers.
All right, actors, thank you very much. We're gonna just give a spotlight to all of our actors. And just take in their brilliance for a moment. Thank you all so much for spending the afternoon with us. We really appreciate you. And it's a silent applause, but we're getting such talented acting, such creative presentation, such fun. I love it. Thank you all so much. I'm gonna unspotlight the actors now. We have Danny again, played by Gabriel Spector. We have
Gabriel Spector.
We have Vlad the Impala, played by the lovely Gary Corbin. We have Cashtown Annie, played by the effervescent Heather Woodbury. And we have the formidable Mr. Patio, Silvana Carasana. Thank you all so much for joining us today. At this time, I would like to ask you all if you need just a moment. I think if anyone needs to take a little bathroom break, I'm going to take this moment to make sure that all of the folks that have been invited into this meeting are in fact here. So bear with me for just one moment. And now I would like for our author to come off of mute and join me here in the Zoom room. And here is the man with the plan, Frank Haberle himself. Frank, thank you. We won't spotlight you quite yet, but just give me one moment here to check in with our attendance sheet. Oh, yes, Frank. Frank, you were quite right about this situation here.
Oh.
Excellent. All right, so we'll give Oscars for all, says Teresa. Actors, you take note of that. Amazing, amazing, amazing work.
That's my sister.
All right, so we know that she's, giving her actual opinion, not a nice opinion. I know my brother tells me when my work is not very good. All right, well, here we go. Actors, I'm gonna take your video away now.
I unfortunately
actors,
do have to disappear at this point.
Gabriel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
so
having
appreciated.
me.
Of course, anytime. And yeah, actors, once we get to the Q&A portion, you feel free to jump in with questions as well. Well, all righty. Here we go. I'm going to spotlight Frank and then stop Gary's video. Great. All right. I don't know why I can't spot. Oh, yes, I can. Here we go. All right, great. Well, Frank, how's it going today?
Going great. That was just so amazing. I really want to thank Silvana and Gary and Gabrielle and Heather and you, Sophia, for that. That was a really fun way to kick off a reading. That was really terrific. Thank you so much.
Well, I will say, I mean, there's this really beautiful kind of wholeness to that excerpt that you've created, but in the novel that you're releasing through Flexible Press, Shufflers, that is not sort of the order of events that occurs, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's just like kind of, that's one of the about 5 or 6 sequences. It's really a series of stories that happen in different places over the course of a couple of years in the 1980s, to this one character, Danny, who just ends up kind of disconnected and adrift, and he starts in New York, he's in New England, ends up in Gettysburg for a while, Boulder, Bend, Alaska. So it's kind of a roundabout the country story. Yeah.
There's something about, we've listened to just now like less than 15 pages of the novel. It is so action packed, and I really feel like that's what makes it such excellent kind of dramatic text for actors. Do you feel that way about the whole novel, Frank, that it's just like moment to moment the protagonist is doing, like physically doing so many different activities?
Yeah, I think that this particular story has a lot of personalities in it, and a lot of other parts of it are more kind of a deep dive into a couple of people who Danny meets when he's working. For example, he gets a job one winter working as a ski lift operator, and the people who work on the hill and their relationship to the skiers is really, another example of kind of a funny story. But this one just comes a lot, and a lot of it is really, fictional and creative in terms of the people, but a lot of it really comes from this kind of memory of what Gettysburg was like in the early 1980s during that horrible time when all the small farms were bought up, and the town just went into, like a lot of rural places, just went into this kind of Great Depression, and in the absence and in the vacuum created by, what was once bustling downtown business becomes kind of like a great haven for, the drug trade in whatever form it takes. So, yeah.
Well, the thought, I mean, you mentioned all of the kind of colorful characters. The thought arose that I should ask you the most interesting person you've ever met, but I feel like there's way too many of them if, if some of these characters are based off of people that you've actually encountered in your life. But something that really stands out about shufflers to me is that Danny is moving, he's shuffling all across America. And we're seeing, in these rural areas that all of the businesses, whether they directly or indirectly serve the farming community, are being really impacted by its shutdown. And as Danny kind of moves all around the country, even in areas that aren't rural, there are just kind of so many issues arriving in the American landscape in the 80s. I really kind of just want to hear, in any form you want to answer, what your relationship is to being a writer and an American and telling this story, which I think is a very American one, it feels to me.
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, I think it starts with the hole in my life that used to be filled with beer, but because there's alcohol just kind of plays a role in the whole story. I mean, it's just kind of like the constant, it's a constant internal struggle that Danny kind of comes to grips with as he goes along in the story. But I'd like to try to, and I think a lot of, I'm going to say, I'm not comparing her in any way, but when I think of like a great American novel, and I think of Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, or you think of The Great Gatsby, which is a totally different financial spectrum, but I think it ties them all together and kind of ties, I think, American literature together. And maybe what I strive for in this is that loneliness. I think loneliness is really a central theme, and it has to do with just being in a country where everybody's displaced for one reason or another. We either came here by migration, or we came here against our will, and we're all kind of cut off from like a traditional history, and the history of, I'm going to say, concentric circles that people, I'm just going to say, in many countries have built for hundreds and thousands of years. So we're all kind of adrift in a lot of ways here in America, and I think that's what's unique about.
Yeah, there's something too about like the loneliness that many of us face as individuals in the face of what feels like kind of collective abundance. I mean, even as we're sort of dealing with the lack of people in greater America that have chosen to get the vaccine, and now this desire amongst those of us who have been vaccinated for a third booster dose. It's like, everyone is so isolated in making choices. We're also kind of over-informed, living in this sea of information. It's really interesting. And I love the way also in the excerpt that we read, but in Shufflers throughout, that the way information tends to move to Danny. He always ends up being this sort of odd conduit for like a really important pieces of information that other people need, but that always sort of get lost in translation. And I feel like a part of that is that Danny is sort of really preoccupied internally, that whatever is happening to him in an external way, he's only ever absorbing half of that, even when he is sober. But yeah, I love that he is kind of constantly in a place where he's learning about himself, in a work environment or not. But do you feel like you've had a period of your life when you were a shuffler? I think it's very brave that you speak about the periods of your life where you were, not sober. But do you want to tell us about the years of your life where you maybe felt you were a shuffler, and what kind of lasting learning happened for you during that time?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, Sophia. I think, a lot of the scenarios in the story, but are based in one way or another, either of things I learned from people I knew while I was kind of adrift for many years, and others are things that I had actually experienced. But it was a different world back then. It really was like there was a gig economy where you could, you would find a flyer on a telephone pole that said we need 4 guys for a loading dock at a factory, and you pick up the phone and you call the person and then go in and have a job with no benefits and make $4 an hour and work yourself until your back went out, or and so I think that there was I definitely did a lot of this over different intermittent periods. I'm going to reference my sister, who's again here, because I think I slept on her couch more than I probably slept on my own. But I think that means, I always had a place to go in a lot of ways, and I'm very grateful for that. I had a wonderful kind of network of friends here and there who would take me in every once in a while. And I think in the story, I try to I kind of fictionalize that a bit and come up with people who are a little more perturbed with the presence of this Danny character who's moved onto their couch and is not leaving. But definitely, I think that it was very hard to kind of sustain a job. And there was just this lower bottom wage world that existed where you really could just go get a job for like 3 weeks or go to a temp agency. There's a lot of things about going to Manpower Temp and they just send you somewhere and you're on. And,
yeah, I mean, it sounds like even as someone who moved to New York to be an artist, I feel deeply stressed out by even the most organized freelancer life. I truly cannot imagine what the experience you're describing would be like. I think I would be frayed from the inside out. But, it's really interesting to hear your periods of your life where you were so kind of mobile or nomadic. I think of you, Frank, as someone who is so anchored to so many different communities. And I'm wondering if you can speak about some of the different communities you're part of, including the Creator Center community, and how they all shape your work as a writer. I mean, I think of family as a community. I think of your work at the New York Writers Coalition as another community. And I'm sure that you have your own cohort of writers that you've kind of come up with that have inspired you as well.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, I think if you drew like circles around, I feel like I've been kind of just trying to write and trying to work on being a storyteller on paper more than trying to be a conventional writer for probably, almost 20 years. And, that starts with having, a wife and family who support that. And especially, having kids who are really creative. And I think that in a lot of ways, my 3 kids have really inspired me to kind of keep writing and keep working on that and kind of cutting out the time to write. So I kind of consider that my first kind of writing circle. And then a second one is the nonprofit community. I've been so grateful to work in these great jobs for the last, 25 years where I'm working in these incredibly inspirational places. Right now, I work at a settlement house in the Bronx where people just do amazing work and have just, especially in the face of this COVID situation and the economic and health impact on a community like that, it's been so inspiring to work with these people. But I think I'm also just so lucky to have this writing circle, the Moving Pen, which the Creative Center has made possible and which another nonprofit group, the New York Writers Coalition, has trained me to facilitate this incredible workshop. And a lot of the people are here on the group. I'm so grateful because I get to go into this circle once a week of writers, and it's not like a conventional writing setting. We're not sitting there critiquing each other or telling everybody, I'd like to hear a little more of that, or your work reminds me of Hemingway. It's more about kind of the immediacy of the writing that we all pull together. We just write quietly together based on prompts that I bring in, and have miles and miles of notebooks, that have just come out of these groups because I get to write as well as everybody in the group. But really, I'm so grateful for that circle and this environment that you've created, Sophia, that makes that the Creative Center has created for us, the group of people in the Moving Pen, to encourage each other to tell stories.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to this thing of being a writer and also working in a nonprofit, I feel not only really inspired by the consistency of arriving in my job and not always knowing what I'm going to be doing during the day in a really delightful and surprising way, but knowing sort of the goals that I need to meet over a long-term period. And it really helps me to sort of define, my own goals as a writer and to think really differently about the people that I encounter and what's important. I think I have really felt in the last year that I want to write about work, not in a critical way, but just in the way, Frank, that you've described the moment of the 80s and when you were arriving in these sort of odd jobs as a quote unquote shuffler. Thinking about how work takes up so much of our lives as Americans and revisiting that as a writer, every 10, 15, 20 years, I think is a brilliant way to sort of navigate through what it means to be American, to be quite honest. That is definitely a theme in Shufflers. But I also just really feel that there are certain chapters that really like hit home for me. And I want to draw everyone's attention to a chapter that was not in the excerpt, but it's one in which Danny is living in Oakland. And he's finally like in a better space. He has a little bit more of a consistent job where he's working actually at a senior center, which was very resonant for me because we do some senior center work at the Creative Center. And Danny says about his job at the senior center, it has the potential to become a real job, he is told. But Danny is working for very little money for someone who in the end will probably never pay him at all. That to me is how it often feels to be a writer, to be quite honest. Like, I think I've been offered so many gigs where I'm like, oh, great, I can be published in a magazine or whatever. And then you realize that you're being asked to do all of this labor and to do it from your heart and your gut, really, as a creative. And you will not be compensated in any way. But to be a productive writer, do you feel like there's things that you're looking for in consistency in publications that are seeking you out or that you're seeking out? What's kind of on your mind when you get to step away from Frank as dad, Frank as nonprofit grants manager, Frank as community facilitator? When you're Frank the writer, like, what do you prioritize?
I would say, it's a really good question because I think when you think about it, I remember being, and this is apologies to anybody, I don't think anybody here was in, but I remember being in a conversation recently with a group of writers and aspiring writers where the conversation was like, okay, what are you working on? And everybody that was sitting there with me was working on getting an agent. And one person said, I want to get an agent more than anything else. And they said, you want to do that more than finish your novel? Yes, I want to get an agent, which was just such a funny, to me, it was such a funny angle because, you understand, because it's really in a lot of ways, that would be the pinnacle of a literary success, right? To be possibly. But I think it's great. I think that if you can release yourself from the kind of the commercial aspects of art in any form, and I think this is true for actors, painters, everybody, and I think you're a lot more free to tell your story, the way you want to tell it. So I think that's always been important to me because I think also, I've spoken of this in the past, but I think you can get tied up in comparison to people who are successful in a commercial aspect. So you see a novel or somebody tells you that your work reminds them of Denis Johnson, or, oh, you're trying to do a Denis Johnson thing. And it paralyzes you as a creative, because you stop creating. You're just like, oh, I think that, so anyhow, I think the most important thing is, regardless, just trying to find the time to write and create, and that could be in whatever form you like. And if that's all getting scribbled into a notebook, that's great. And if what you're scribbling in the notebook is screw the government 300 times a day, that's great, because you're writing and you're getting something from all the chaos up here down into a contained thing. So I think that's really the most important thing as a creator.
Oh yeah, that's definitely what writing allows me to arrive at, is some kind of recovery of like making sense of the world around me. Even I'm very into the recommended morning pages from Julia Cameron's The Artist Way, and looking back through my morning pages, I'm able to really sort of keep track of like if I'm getting to where I want to be in a day or a week or a month or a year, no matter how long it takes me to get there. And yeah, Frank, I really feel this. I feel this with writers in New York of kind of all ages. I think there's something about the credential of having an agent, and particularly my background is in playwriting, but also you know, being associated with institutions and your resume just becoming a list of institutions as opposed to allowing people to understand what it is that you think is important as a creative person and what you've dedicated your life to. And I feel every time, you know, we sit down to have a moving pen that you have so dedicated your life to building a community of writers, not just like arriving at an event with your colleagues or arriving, you know, at a creative center event to sort of do the work, but then to have it all lead to a moment where you can tell people about what it is that you're writing. And that honestly to me was the thing that made me so excited to invite you to speak with us and to do this excerpt reading, because I find the depth and breadth of your work to be so fantastic, but also so different than the way that you arrive in our space. And I kind of want to ask you if it's ever hard for you to hold the Frank or the memories of this kind of being a shuffler and also be, you know, a community facilitator, an incredible communicator, someone who's kind of like always arriving a few steps ahead. If you ever feel sort of this tension between like present and past or public and private.
I'm just trying to picture all the people I worked for when I was a shuffler in the 80s and all the people who knew me back then.
They probably wouldn't recognize you at all now, I would assume.
It's like 2 steps ahead is not my would not be my earlier reputation.
Well, we'll keep that a secret. We'll keep that a secret.
I like this idea. But the communication thing I think is really interesting, because I will tell you that during that period, in my life, I was actually had a really difficult time communicating, and so a lot of things I that got converted into things in the book as a work of fiction are actually like more like kind of observational, like things I observed than things I was actually a part of. And you know, I think that there were a lot of you know, there were obstacles back then, but there were also obstacles that got put up for me in that period of my life and much earlier in my life that kind of set me on that trajectory. But it's really interesting. It's been really interesting. I'm just the one person I actually want to acknowledge from the writing group who is not with us anymore, but is with us completely in our heart is Michelle Slater, who passed away this last year, and we loved Michelle. She was kind of difficult sometimes and impish and just so creative and
so giving too. She just like one day came to give me a handkerchief that was like made of silk, just like totally random.
And she loved us, you know. And she also, I'm just gonna give her credit because she's the one who kind of pulled out this kind of line of stories out of me in the group, just like her encouragement and her feedback to early writing I did about kind of my work world back then, which I wasn't totally comfortable maybe exploring even in a creative way. And she was the one who really kind of pulled that out, and just so grateful.
Yeah, we're getting some of our moving pen members are acknowledging that is so sweet. And yeah, I mean, Michelle is not like a character from Shufflers, but in a sense she is a little bit, because she was such a zesty human. Like so many days she would arrive with just these like zingers. And that's something too that I think it's really wonderful to see a book about people who are not in a good place in their life, which I think of a couple of characters in Shuffler, if not Danny, the protagonist as well. They're not in a great place, but they're still kind of arriving fully to live in the moment. And while that can be kind of hard to encounter as a viewer, it also makes me feel very alive that you know, they are just sort of in these moments of joy and discovery, even if the circumstances are really dire. And there's actually a really great question in the chat that I want to bring in before I ask one more question, and then we open it up for everyone to just comment and ask more questions. But Carly asks, so curious, why is the book in present tense? And I feel like I have a response to that, but author, please take the lead on that.
First of all, I have to flag Carly as the second oldest person after my older sister on the call who has known me the longest. We went to high school together, and she's a great friend of mine from high school, and I'm so glad to be in touch with her. And I would say, I don't know why. I think you have to find like where you're comfortable writing in a lot of ways. So when I told the stories, I think that what I was thinking of, I'm just going to go with the ski lift story. When I was thinking of the ski lift story, and I think of it in the past tense, it's me but if I'm in the present tense, I'm going through it and I'm trying to lead the readers through it for the first time. And I really like it because I think my writing relies a lot on the kind of physical, like the tactile stuff around and everything that's happening, and something that's totally irrelevant. The squeaky noise the ski lift makes, or the way the snow smells, it just seems more tangible in the present. And so it's just a matter of like how you're comfortable. And so that was just more comfortable telling the story, I think, in that.
Well, I have a very different response that has to do with my practice of being a dramatic writer. But I think one of the reasons this text was so easy to adapt into script text is because this is very urgent. Like, even in the moments where the stakes are low, like they're just, you know, in the Gettysburg restaurant where there may or may not be Confederate legs in the freezer, they, you know, Cash Down Annie and Danny are like, there's a questioning always of identity, and that really feels urgent to me even when the stakes are low. So I think it's why that, and the writing being so active, is why it makes this really wonderful to be read by actors. So Frank, I hope that you have a mind to sort of potentially adapt some of these stories into short screenplays, or Shufflers the TV show. I'm there, sign me up. But I have one more question for you, and then folks who are in the audience, if anyone has more questions, please put them in the chat. And then if there are no more questions, I would love to promote other people to panelists to just like say hi to Frank, Carly, Teresa. We would love to just like hear your voices and hear funny anecdotes about Frank in his younger days as a writer, perhaps. Not too embarrassing though, we got to keep it professional. So no matter the situation, I feel like Danny's inner monologue, his thoughts are like kind of hilarious, and the sort of glib delivery that Gabriel gave, like just so, it's like so funny to me. I think I just have a very bizarre sense of humor, but this book takes place in so many locations physically, but the landscape of Danny's mind is really consistent. Do you feel like he, as a protagonist, at any point in the full novel of Shufflers, goes through a big change? And can you tell us a little bit about you know, how that change satisfies the story for you as the author?
First, I have to say, Gabriel, I just, the character, that was just such a great performance, and was so reminiscent, right down to the sunburn. I was just, who could have planned that? But that was really great. And I think that, well, actually, I think in the book, there's a very subtle transformation that the Danny character goes through, where all of a sudden he is, you know, comes to grips with the drinking part of the problem, and then goes through a long kind of path, which means that you know, drinking was only part of the problem, and it's you know, it's something I've kind of, you know, wrestled with later. I quit drinking 30 years ago, and I think that but it has a way of kind of casting a spell over everything, and everything's kind of glib and funny, and then when one stops, you know, the loneliness is still there, and a lot of the problems are still there. The difficulty connecting with people are still there. And so I think that that's like an interesting, you know, I just thought, like, as I was telling the story, this just kind of slipped into the story, that there was this transformation, and there's this period, which is probably less comical, where Danny is sober until, you know, temptation ensues later. But yeah, it's a really, but I think it's a very interesting, like, present, you know, I felt it was a very interesting presence to make part of the story, because it just, the story doesn't hold together without kind of coming to grips with that.
Yeah, I love that, Frank. I think that depicting gradual change in writing is really important. And I think it's one of my most favorite things about reading novels versus consuming video content, where like we need to arrive at like a full reversal of who you are by the end of a 90-minute movie. It's just started to feel so unrealistic to me, like I can't handle it anymore. So I cannot tell you, I've already gotten the great joy of reading early drafts of Shufflers, but I cannot tell you how excited I am to purchase a copy and to continue to read as it's in its final form. We had someone drop the link in the chat to purchase it. And again, that's also in the program. But I also just want to ask if there are any more questions. Alicia is saying, can't wait to get her copy. Alicia, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
And can I just one quick thing? I just wanted to flag the person who dropped that tag is Bill Burleson, who is the publisher of Flexible Press, who pulled my book out of a slush pile last year and helped me to kind of breathe. It was great because I was very excited about it, but it was also kind of like there's some connector here, and it really helped me to kind of work on that and just bring it to life. So I want to thank Bill. Just I'm so grateful to him.
Oh yeah, writing is rewriting.
Yeah. Oh.
And I think that rewriting with a publisher who you can trust is like the ideal circumstance. So yeah, thanks, Bill. Leave it to the publisher to post a link to buy the book. We love that. Thank you.
Flexible Press.
Flexible Press, everyone.
Great
Represent. Awesome. Well, I would love to hear some more questions. Any lovely comments? We would love to spotlight anyone or get you on video. Please feel free to raise a hand or put something in the chat. We'll awkwardly be here in silence for like 2-3 more minutes unless someone wants to ask a question. We'll leave it here. Let Frank go celebrate his great victory. Well, I also feel like, Frank, could we talk about, while everyone's thinking of their wonderful, brilliant questions, could we talk about other potential things that you're writing or what else is kind of on your mind as a writer? I would really like to know.
Yeah, lightning kind of struck twice because I feel like I finished this book in the first part of the pandemic when we were all, those first 3 months and when I was stuck in this apartment, which you see here, aided in a large part because we actually had a meth lab in the downstairs apartment, which kept me up all night, which is why I was writing. So I want to thank the meth dealers downstairs. And although, so I kind of got the secondhand fumes helped. And then, but there was a second part where I wrote a novella, which is coming out in March. And so I got lucky again. I sent it to another place where it was pulled out of a slush pile. And so I have a book coming out in March, which is a novella. And it's actually a very different story. It's about two boys who are orphaned who get sent off to a strange boarding school in the early 1970s, another dynamic time period in history. And they get sent off to a strange New England boarding school.
Well, if we have a book talk for that, I know exactly who I want to moderate the panel. And it's another creative center instructor who's also a fabulous writer who also was adopted. So Frank, let me know if you're interested in that content. I just want to say, one last time for questions. And then I also just want to say, we got some favorite lines from Alicia. I'll read these. Favorite lines: the 6 naked children, the air smelled like popcorn. That's so tactile. Like we're all immediately present when we are getting the waft of popcorn. The body of the old lady spinning on the ceiling, the sort of reoccurring moments of dead woman crick. And also just, I found it to be really wonderful. I am a writer also, but not, known as a director, and our actors really took it upon themselves to sort of investigate what the accents of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania might be like. And I thought that they really delivered on that. So actors, again, thank you so much. Frank, I can't believe you wrote this book while there was a meth lab under your house. That sounds very disruptive. As someone who has lived also adjacent to like very illicit drug activities, it's very distracting and distressing. So good on you. You've pushed through the global pandemic, the meth lab, you've seen it all. Well, awesome, friends. I guess if there are no more questions, last call, we'll leave it here. It was so lovely to spend the evening with you, Frank Haberle. We hope that you all check out Shufflers from Flexible Press and have a wonderful and safe weekend. Cheers to Frank and everyone. Congrats.
Thank you again to the actors and to you, Sophia. That was just fantastic. It was really fun.
I don't think I've had this much fun on Friday in a while, which maybe says something about my life, but
yeah, me too.
Well, moving pen members, we'll see you on Monday. We can't wait to hear more from you about Frank's work. And to all of our viewers, to Joan Mellon, who's chatting us, thank you so much for being here with the Creative Center for Shufflers, the book talk and excerpt reading. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.